Spring training. I'm looking at springtrainingcountdown.com right now. 30 days, 12 hours, 45 minutes, and 37 seconds as we're recording this Sunday morning, 11:15 Eastern Standard Time. That's how close we are.
Is that when pitchers and catchers report, or is that actual spring
That's
training
pitchers and catchers reporting.
Okay. All right.
And I used to, back in the day, I was like, oh God, who cares about the post? This guy's in camp, that guy's in camp. I don't care. It's just like, I need this.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, my daughter Em and I were talking this morning, and like, she is blown away by Bryce Harper on TikTok right now. We may have TikTok for another week, but she's like, this man needs baseball. And I was like, yeah, we all need it right now. But like, he's on TikTok showing how to make vanilla lattes and banana bread right now. And she's just like, oh my God, what is he doing? And I was like, honey, it's like us. Like, we're just so ready for baseball. We're trying to do anything. And this is what Bryce Harper has decided to do. And I think it's hilarious. He looks half baked in it, but maybe that's just his natural look.
There's definitely something going on in his eyes when he's making these videos. So I ran into that the other day too. He's already at like 200,000 followers.
Of course he is.
Insane. I'm excited for baseball. The thing I'm most excited about for when pitchers and catchers report is the inevitable overreaction to everything, right? Because you said, like, we're all just waiting for news. We're all just waiting for baseball. And the moment someone comes in and goes, oh, well, he's a little bit behind as a pitcher, everybody's going to freak out. He's going to drop a bunch of spots, or, oh, this person's working on a new pitch. He's going to jump up 30 spots. So I love the overreaction in the first week of pitchers and catchers reporting. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the pictures. I'm not going to be able to make it down. I was trying to make it down to Florida, but I'm looking at my schedule, and it's just not going to work out this year for me to get down, because we've got tout in 2 months from today. Labor is going to be virtual draft this year, and then I've got to go back to New York for Moneyball at the end of March. So a lot of travel coming up, and not a lot of the money in the travel don't balance out very well right now. I don't have the travel points anymore. Back in the day when I was the travel wizard, as Paul called me, it was like, oh, just here's some points, go. Right now I have enough points for like a free hotel night somewhere, and I'm just about for a free one-way flight, but I just don't travel anymore. And I'm on the to be fully transparent, I am fully fine with that. I don't need that life anymore. I'm much more happier these days that I don't have to live, especially after this week. Last week we talked about travel and hopefully getting there. It took me 19 hours to get from Charlotte to Aberdeen, and the hotel that I had right next door to the Aberdeen Ironbirds stadium. Don't recommend that. But Amtrak eventually got me there, and there we are. So made it home. But yeah, I'm fine staying at home. And let's talk some baseball.
Well, I will give you plenty to do in the month of March, even though you won't be traveling. We have TGFBI, which is going to be kicking off the first week of March. That second weekend of March will be Potapalooza this year. So that's going to be fun. Like you said, Tout Wars the second week of or the third week of March.
And the Wharf draft. I got, the Earth drafts. We have Wharf is scheduled. Waffle House League is scheduled for February 15th.
That's the best name. That's the best name. I love that name. And you guys have a fantastic championship trophy. I mean,
it is cool. So I am looking forward to that draft. Again, I think 12 of the 15 are going to be there live. There's a couple of people who just couldn't do it live, but we had a good time last year, and looking forward to doing that again.
Yeah, we're scheduling the Barf draft right now. I think it's going to be February 22nd, but we'll see. And then usually I'm traveling too all throughout March, but like you said, labor is going to be not in person this year. It's going to be online. And then I don't think I'm going to Vegas again this year. So I'm just traveling for Tout Wars in March, but I'm looking forward to it. So we're going to just continue our conversation from last week. We'll talk a couple of news and notes of some signings that happened over the weekend. But then there were just so many sophomore pitchers we never got to that I just feel like we could just do another whole episode, and we will, on the guys, including the guy we both mentioned liking, which is David Festa.
Right.
So I just felt like I needed to have that conversation with you since we're both big fans. So let's start, though, with some news. we've got Jeff Hoffman signing a deal with the Blue Jays. It's a 3-year, $33 million deal, I believe. What were your thoughts on Hoffman heading to Toronto?
Not the place I thought he would end up. I have a few
Yeah.
thoughts on this. One, I love Jeff. I love Jeff Hoffman. I've loved him for a couple of years. Thought he was one of the guys that I actively targeted last year, going into, just because I thought the skills. You look at the last 2 years, what he's done out of the bullpen. He's been one of the best relievers by outcomes in baseball. Just hasn't had a bunch of save opportunities, but he has been one of the best relievers in baseball from that in that time. For me, I don't understand what Toronto's doing, because if Jordan Romano, as we've jokingly said, that's what Toronto calls him, so we'll call him. If he is truly healthy and he went to Philadelphia, then why not just keep him around? Why go the multiple extra years with Hoffman? Because I mean, Toronto, I don't know what Toronto is. We've talked about a couple episodes. Both of us have the same frustration. What is this team's identity? And they were the last place team in this division last year. Hoffman doesn't move the needle that much. Maybe it takes them out of being the surefire last place team. But if they can't sign Vlad Jr. and they decide to trade him, then they go into full rebuild. It's like this 2025 is make or break year. And I don't see how this helps. That said, I'm glad Hoffman got paid. He should be that full-time closer. If you had cheap Chad Green shares, sorry, Chad Green did a pretty decent job. But this is a move that, like 2-3 years ago, Toronto, I'd have been like, yes. Right now, just don't get that. What are you doing? Why is that happening? So that's where I'm a little. That's where I'm frustrated. And then the whole news about Baltimore passing on him because there was an issue in the physical. You can't just put that news out there and it not be true. So maybe there was something in there, but who was the last club? There was some other club that had done that recently in the last couple of years where they said there was something and they walked back out of a contract. I forget who it was.
Giants and Correa. I mean,
yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah,
that's a good example. So, and then it is what it is. I mean, it's just, it's nice to have some closer. We know Hoffman's in a role. So do we get Tanner Scott somewhere? Do we get Carlos Estevez somewhere? Now that we know what the market price is for these other that Hoffman has set a market value price, we'll see if that trickle down effect happens this week. But I just don't get this from Toronto's perspective. They have other needs, and needs 1, 2, 3, and 4 should be either extending Vlad or getting out of Vlad and trading him right now. And adding this, I just don't get this from a baseball perspective. But this is a fantasy show, so for fantasy, this will be good for Hoffman. It's bad for Green, and I just don't see how it moves the needle that much for Toronto.
I mean, I think it makes their bullpen so much better getting a guy like Hoffman that can just lock down the ninth. I don't think there's going to be any issues them locking down the ninth. I also don't think it's going to be any issues for them to trade him if they need to, right? Like, it is a 3-year deal, but it's not a ton of money for a guy who's got the kind of experience and skills that Hoffman does. So if they need to get from under it, if they do decide to tear it down, because I do think, hey, if they're not competing, they've got to tear this down. So, I don't think it'll be a difficult contract for them. From a fantasy perspective, I love it. He's going to get the opportunities to close. But I agree with you. From a real life baseball perspective, I don't know what they're doing. They still have so many holes. The back half of their lineup looks atrocious. Once you get past Andres Jimenez at the 6th spot, got Ernie Clement playing 3rd. Nathan Luke's in center field because Dalton Varsho is likely starting the year on the IL, and then Joey Loperfido, who has shown some flashes as a strong side bat, but I don't think he's the long-term answer in left field either. So I would expect them to still go out and make some other moves, especially something at 3rd. It's interesting to me that they have not been tied to Bregman at all. They were tied to Soto.
They were tied to Santander, weren't they?
Yeah, they were tied to Santander. Okay. I don't know if Santander is the right move either, but I guess they do need a left fielder right now. Well, no, I mean they really need. I guess they've got Will Wagner DHing, so I guess they could just put Santander at DH. So, but yeah, the back half of this lineup's atrocious. I just don't know what they're doing there. I think the rotation I think is fine. With Gosman, Abrios, Francis, Bassett, and Yariel Rodriguez, but that lineup needs some help. And I don't know how they haven't gone out and at least gotten a third baseman. Go after Bregman. I mean, they were in on Soto, they were in on Ohtani last year. They've got the money to spend. Like, go get Bregman and make this lineup just that much better.
I know it would probably turn the stomachs of Jays fans, but it's like, I'm going to Boston and I'm saying, what do you want to pay for Vlad? We want Tristan Casas, and we want.
They can't.
I know you can't, but what I'm saying, Boston's got one of the best, if not the best, farm system in the league right now. Go dangle that out there and say you want first right of refusal on a contract extension with Vlad. And maybe it's one of these things where, okay, we'll do a trade, but only if Vlad does an extension with us right now type of thing. And you put that out there and it's like, okay, it's built around Casas, and you try to add a couple of other pieces off that. And like I said, it would turn to something a Toronto's fan, but look, as you just said, look at this current roster. This is not a contending team. It just too many things have to go right, and there's so much more that could go wrong with this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. So, all right, moving on to the next piece of news, which is another reliever signing. We've been talking all off season about how bad the Nationals bullpen looks. They had Jorge Lopez. What are your thoughts on Lopez in Washington?
How long is he going to stay there? I mean, how many teams can this guy pitch for? He's gone the Edwin Jackson path. We've seen him in Baltimore. We've seen him in Chicago. We've seen him with the Mets. I'm losing track of how many teams he's pitched for lately. But he has rarely stayed on one team for an entire season with this. And it gives them experience. It gives them experience, depth. And it gives me another name that I actually recognize out of this bullpen, because the joke a few weeks ago was name 3 guys out of this bullpen, and I only knew I knew 2 of them only because Joe LaSorsa pitched for the Rays very briefly. So it gives me a recognizable name. There's no way they're done here. This can't be it. As we said, I think just even last week, I know you and Paul are very excited about the Nationals, about what the potential could be for that club. I mentioned the imbalance between the hitting and the pitching. This adds depth, but this can't be. Go get Tanner Scott now. Go get Estes. You lost your chance on Hoffman, but go get another experienced reliever.
Yeah, I think they need one more reliever, and then this team is pretty good to go into 2025. I don't think they're going to make any major moves rest the way, but they've got 6 starters. There's a question on how good some of those guys are, but and we're going to talk about a couple of them today.
Oh, yeah, 2 of them.
But I think they still need bullpen help, and especially if they are having dreams of competing this year. A guy like Estes makes a lot of sense. A guy like Tanner Scott makes a lot of sense. The back end of that bullpen, that would just make their bullpen just so much deeper. So I agree. Though for right now, if they don't go get anybody, Jorge Lopez probably the closer, right?
Probably.
Yeah. So if you're in drafts, I think starting bumping up Jorge Lopez in case the Nationals don't go get another bigger name is the move. I think he would be given the first shot to close.
Maybe he pulls I'm only pulling this name out of the hat because he was recently named the manager of the Charlotte Knights here, but Sergio Santos is now the new manager of the Charlotte AAA White Sox. And I went back and looked. I'm like, I know I had him on a fantasy team. Well, it's like Sergio Santos, and because I thought it was an odd ad for them, but then Sergio Santos, I had forgotten. He had saved 30 games for the White Sox in 2011, and then he saved 8 the rest of his career. Like that winter, he was traded to the Jays and then got hurt. And then that was kind of it. But like he had 1 save, 30 saves, and then he finished his career with 39 saves. So maybe that Lopez could pull this, hey, I got a job. I'm just going to go out there and close some games. And I mean, Santos, that 2011 season, 63 1/3, 92 strikeouts, 30 saves, 4 wins. That was a pretty massive season. And that was it. It was one and done.
All right. The last piece of news we have is kind of a bummer of news, but one that shouldn't have been completely unexpected. That is Brandon Woodruff, very unlikely to be ready for opening day, having some issues with his shoulder that has been surgically repaired. This shouldn't come as a surprise because he missed all of last season. And there were reports out there that could have been a career-ending injury. He did re-sign with the Brewers in order to try to make a comeback here. You taking Woodruff completely off your board?
So I wanted to bring this up because I saw a note in Jeff Zimmerman's Binding the News column. Currently, Woodruff has an ADP of 211.
Yeah, it's
and
insane.
The news, remember, this was a shoulder capsule injury. That's probably the worst one a pitcher can have. The history of coming back from those is simply not good. Tommy John, everything that's, they can do that. There's only so much they can do with shoulders. But shoulder capsule injuries, really terrible. Like Adam Lowen's one of the guys, if you guys remember, prospect folks, the lefty, he had that issue. There's multiple guys out there. Roger Salkeld's another one. I just think of some older names, but the recovery rate from this particular injury, not well. I can't believe how high Brandon Woodruff's going, because when you look at opportunity, like the fantasy trickle down effect of this is Pat Murphy has already said they want to get DL Hall and Aaron Ashby. I always say, I want to make sure I don't say Allen, who's the catcher of my favorite club growing up as a kid. Aaron Ashby and DL Hall. They want to get them stretched out for starters because Pat Murphy, in his words, is they could be used in the rotation. So I see that as, Brandon Woodruff not going to be ready for opening day. And then who knows? And even in the recent interview he did, he said, I'm not going to be myself until the second half of the season. So yeah, he's pretty much off my draft board. I can let that go. And then I know that the Yankees offered arbitration to Nestor Cortez. Then there's no way they would have done that if the forearm was a concern for them. And I'm sure the medicals went over in the trade, but that still happened. That forearm issue was still there. So it's like, okay, if you got Woodruff and you got Cortez as two question marks in a rotation, and then another guy we're going to talk about later who doesn't have the health is, we got two health question marks, and they're talking about stretching out Ashby and Hall. Then, to me, that's enough red flag for me to say Woodruff is off my board. And I'm just like blown away that he is the second pitcher out of this, off this staff, considering what he's trying to come back from.
Yeah, he's completely off my board. He wasn't really on my board in kind of the early draft season anyways. I needed to see him pitch in spring training to feel confident about drafting him. And that's just not going to happen. So I would not be drafting Brandon Woodruff. I'll probably project him for like 70 innings or something like that. We'll just drop him so far that there's no way I'm able to get to him. So I would not be drafting Brandon Woodruff this year. It's a bummer because he's one of my favorite pitchers to watch when he's healthy, but he's just, we need to see health before we can buy in on it. So, all right, let's move on to these sophomore pitchers, the part two of it. We're going to start with Spencer Arrieghti, who's going at pick 215 in NFBC Draft Champions League since the middle of November. Arrieghti had like some real flashes of talent, but also can struggle with command and control quite a bit. Where are you at on Arrieghti?
Yeah, there was definitely some peaks and valleys within his numbers. I remember taking a look because I want to say I did his RotoWire player outlook. And I'm looking at 4 different starts where he allowed at least 5 or more earned runs. And then there was that one outing against Detroit in the middle of the summer where he allowed 7 earned runs, 3 home runs in an inning and a third. Then he had the one against Kansas City where another 7 earnings in 3 innings. Then he had one against Toronto, 6 earnings in 4, and then a 5-5 at Yankee Stadium. So he had some of those. And then he had the 13 strikeout performance against Boston, the 12 strikeout performance against Tampa Bay, the 11 against the Phillies, and the 10 against the Rockies. So it's like it's all over the place with him. That said, you and Paul were talking, even on the last one, the first base preview, when you talked about how much you liked the Christian Walker addition and what Houston's doing offensively. Like the conditions should be there. Arrieghti, the fact that he only won a quarter of his 28 starts, he was 7-13 because of that rookie inconsistency. I could easily see him being a guy that should have double-digit wins this year. And if you add double-digit wins to what he's giving you in strikeouts already, all of a sudden his value goes up. It's like we have a custom leaderboard that's in the podcast notes, and you look at Arrieghti, and we have a 27.1% strikeout rate and a 16.8% strikeout minus walk rate. Both of those are above average. So for last year, for starting pitchers, The average strikeout rate was 22%. The average strikeout minus walk percentage was 14.4. Arriegheti's exceeding both of those. And strikeout minus walk is the stickiest of these type of things. If you want to pick one stat, and by the way, this was also something that DVR, Eno, and Trevor May brought up in the most recent Race and Barrels podcast. They talked about like, hey, if you want to get started being a pitching nerd, and they all said like K minus BB is my favorite one. It's been my favorite for a while as well, because it's a great place to start. And the fact that Arriegheti is better than average in those areas, and you could see like focus on that and not the outcomes. Like, oh, the 141 whip that hurt, 4.53 ERA that hurt too. But we just looked at the end process. There were some great moments and there were some awful moments. Mm-hmm. That's what happens as a rookie. But I like Arriegheti. Probably of all the pitchers we're going to talk about, my second favorite guy of all the pitchers we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, he's probably my third or fourth favorite guy out of the guys we're going to talk about. I like Arriegheti. I mean, you look at what he did over the course of the full season, and he threw 145 innings, 4.53 ERA. But he did have a 27% strikeout rate, and he made improvements as the season went on. From August 1st on, he had a 2.72 ERA in 53 innings, kept that good strikeout rate, but really started to limit the walks. And that includes just an absolute shellacking that he took in Cincinnati, where he only threw 2/3 of an inning, gave up 9 earned runs. Or no, actually, it was only 3 earned runs, but he gave up 9 total runs. Walked.
And that was a scoring. I remember that game. That was a scoring.
Yeah.
They went back later and changed something, and that certainly helped him.
Yeah,
because that could have been ugly.
That outing almost single-handedly took me out of first place in labor last year. So it was pretty brutal, but he definitely made improvements. There's still command and control issues, but it is a live arm and one I'm willing to bet on at around pick 200. I don't think that is an unfair price at all, especially when we start talking about a lot of the other guys going around that spot who are just as inconsistent. So Arriegheti is a guy that I will be looking at as a potential guy to grab around pick 200. Let's get to the guy we both want to talk about, and I'm sure the number one guy on both of our lists, and that is David Festa. Festa was a top-tier prospect, struggled in his kind of, first couple starts at the major league level. But after that, he was pretty darn good rest of the way. First start at Arizona, he threw 5 innings, gave up 5 earned runs, then had a start home versus Detroit, gave up pitched 5 innings, gave up 7 earned runs. But after that, and after the All-Star break, David Festa threw 54 1/3 innings, had a 3.81 ERA, 11 strikeouts per 9, was not giving up home runs, didn't give up a single multi-homer game, and did a pretty good job of limiting the walks. I mean, not amazing, but it did a decent job. This is a former top-tier prospect, so where are you at on David Festa?
Yeah, as the folks at Twins Daily like to call him, the Slim Reaper. I mean, that should be Paul's nickname, right? That should be Paul. Paul the Slim Reaper.
That's a great one. Yeah,
I was like, this is awesome. So it's like one of the things that attracted me to Festa is, if you haven't read the process work from Tanner Bell and Jeff Zimmerman, you should. And they have a appendix version. Get the base version. I think it's $20, and then you can buy download the appendices for subsequent years for much cheaper than that. But one of the things they found in their research is like breakout pitchers. A strikeout per 9 of at least 8.0, fastball velocity of at least 93, and 1 above average secondary pitch. He was like 15% of the time or more. Festa meets all 3 of those requirements with that. And so when we talk about all the pitchers we're going to talk about today, Festa has the best strikeout minus walk rate of the group, 19.5%. He's better than anybody else that we're going to talk about in that regard today. For another stat I like to look at is, Justin, I know you're a huge fan of zone contact rate for hitters. I'm like that for pitchers. I want to know, how hittable are you when you're in the zone? When you have to come in and throw strikes, you have to work in the zone. How hittable are you? Festa has the 3rd best third lowest rather zone contact rate for pitchers of this list. Arrieghti is actually slightly better than that. And then, but the lowest guy we haven't even talked about yet. So those are two things I like to look at. So for me, there's a lot of swing and miss in Festa. Festa, somebody that I did take last year as well, but we had, the ups and downs with things, but we closed that last week talking about how much you were in on Bailey Ober last year. I see a lot of similarities with what Festa could be, what Ober did, and where Festa could be headed. And that's why, especially where we're seeing ADP wise, where he's going, I'm very interested in getting him while the getting's good. Like right now, it's 288 since December 1st in Draft Champions, and he's going just in front of Nestor Cortez, Kumar Rocker. Looks like potential closer AJ Puck in Arizona. I mean, he's down here at 114th on the pitcher list. On the ADP pitcher list, not the site pitcher list. So I'm curious to see where the pitcher list has David Festa as well. But like David Festa is going he's going right there with Bubba Chandler. And we mentioned Bubba Chandler last week on this show. Bubba Chandler's not even on the 40-man roster yet. David Festa is on the 40-man roster and is in the rotation and is going behind the potential of what Bubba Chandler could be. And that to me is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if Bubba Chandler is going to be, in the major leagues at a usable point in the major or during the season. So I definitely would take David Festa over Bubba Chandler. Nick, not a fan. Nick has him at pitcher 100. So we'll have to have a chat with Nick when we see him.
Man, is this gonna be my like Framber Valdez versus Cole Reagan's thing with him? Yes. I gotta find somebody he likes better than Festa and be like, all right, that's this year's fight, Nick.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot of guys he likes better than Festa. But I'm with you. I think that especially if you take away those first two starts where he clearly was just dealing with either nerves or just kind of learning how to pitch. I mean, he was fantastic after those first two starts. And if you look at that zone contact, it drops even farther once you eliminate those first two starts where you got kind of knocked around. So I think Festa, and with the news that the Twins have been looking at potentially trading Pablo Lopez, like I think Festa is guaranteed a spot in this rotation. I think he's one of these guys you should be taking game on. Pick 300 right now, or 296. I think is just a prime buying spot for a guy like Festa, who's got a lot of upside, showed a lot of flashes last year. So I'm with you on Festa. I think he is definitely my favorite guy of this list. The guy you were referencing just a little bit ago, in terms of having the lowest zone contact numbers out of the guys on the list, is DJ Herz. DJ Herz kind of came out of nowhere last year. I don't even know if I had heard of him coming into the season.
You hadn't heard of him?
I hadn't heard of him.
I had to do the dad joke. Sorry.
He was really good at points throughout the season. Had some bumps early on, and then kind of finished a little bumpy as well. But showed some flashes. Where are you at on DJ Herz?
Honestly, it's something that the numbers drew my attention. So, again, off this list, I mentioned Festa had the best strikeout minus walk percentage. Herz is next. So he's got the second best strikeout minus walk rate. He's got the lowest in zone contact rate. Then you jump over, you start digging into the pitches last year. All four of his offerings had at least a 25% swing and miss rate, and none of them had an opponent's batting average outcome. I mean, that could be all low, but none of them were above 230. It's like if I were to hide the name and say, hey, I got a pitcher with 4 pitches with 25% higher strikeout rate who's got this and this, where are you at on him? And if I, again, name removed, I'm guessing his ADP would be, you'd be like, oh, I'm probably going around pick 250. He's going 311.
Yeah.
So to me, this feels like, 311, do the math, 30 times 50 to 15 team, that gets to 450. This is a kind of the very late teens type of situation. This is a dart worth taking. If the Nationals are a team that we can consider taking that step forward, this to me feel like, I know there's a lot of attention on Mackenzie Gore, and I'm curious to see if I go back up and just looking at the context of the team, if we're to see where Gore's going in relation. So Gore's going 198. And then Herz is next out of this rotation at 311. So if this is a club that people think will be better, but only one of their starting pitchers is going inside the top 300, to me, that is an opportunity for value. And if anybody else is going to take a step forward in this rotation, Herz has the foundation, the ingredients for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he gives up a few home runs, but nothing that is super alarming. 1.1 homer per 9 last year. What he does do is strike out a lot of guys. He had a 28% strikeout rate. He did walk a fair amount of guys, but it was much better than he had been in the minor leagues. So I think the control is really where the issues for Herz could lie. If he's not going to take a step forward, it's because he's having a hard time keeping men off of base via the free pass.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff is good. And like you said, he's got a full arsenal. This is the kind of guy that I tend to like to target because he's kind of underrated in the market. He's got a full pitching arsenal. He doesn't give up home runs. If he can keep that control in check, I think Herz could take another step forward and be really interesting. And I'll point out, like, his ERA was 4.16, but his xERA 3.29 last year. That is a massive difference.
You take a look, and I sometimes I'm amused by the similar pitchers thing on Savant. Sometimes I'm intrigued. These are the names that are similar pitchers. The names that show up: Freddie Peralta, Spencer Arrieghti, Ryan Pepio, and Sean Manaea. Like, just enough. That's enough to be like, I need to take a different look at this guy to say, all right, we see these other things. These are the pitchers. I loved Manaea. I loved Manaea going into last year, and that played out extremely well. Peralta's always been fun. Arrieghti, there was some noise about him coming into camp last year, but there's enough here where I'm still surprised he's going outside the top 300.
Yeah, I am as well. So we'll see if he continues or if he starts to kind of trickle up here in a little bit. We did talk about Brandon Woodruff, but you also mentioned we're going to be talking about one of his teammates today, and that is Tobias Myers. Again, another one of these guys where I didn't really know Tobias Myers coming into last year, but if you look at just the surface numbers, he was amazing. 138 innings through 138 innings last year. Had a 3 flat ERA. Now, the strikeout rate is something a little bit to be desired, right? 22% strikeout rate, but it was just a 6% walk rate. Where are you at on Tobias Myers? Because he feels like a kind of a crafty vet who's only 26.
He's been around for a bit too, because remember, like, Baltimore drafted him. Then Baltimore traded him to Tampa Bay in 2017 for Tim Beckham. And I will forever love Tobias Myers because the Rays traded Tobias Myers to Cleveland for Junior Caminero. Straight up, by the way. Straight up. So thank you. Then he went to then he was purchased by your Giants. Then the Giants was like, they waived him. He was grabbed by the White Sox. The White Sox were like, this guy's too good for us. We're going to waive him. And then he signed as a free agent with Milwaukee. And he, found his success. And one of his things, I've always kind of looked at him like Jeremy Hellickson type of, like, his best pitch is his off-speed stuff. And the same thing that made Hellickson successful for a while was the ride on his fastball, his ability to locate it at the top of the zone, and then the use his off-speed the way he did. And eventually that caught up with him. And that's my fear with Myers, is eventually that's going to happen with him too, because he doesn't have the velocity to get away with mistakes, and he's got to rely on the location. I mean, just look at last year, he got 13 home runs off his fastball with that, and another 4 off the cutter. So if you want to combine those two, there's 17 home runs off his fastballs situation. So I'm not as crazy about him. If you pull up back at the leaderboard, 16%, his strikeout minus walk ratio was above league average. But zone contact, he was one of the higher. He's one of the 4 highest for the contact in the zone. And the strikeout rate was right there at league average. But of the guys we've talked about so far, this feels like the riskiest of them all.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Like, he has great command and control, right? Like, you look at his location plus, it is the highest of the guys on this list at 106. But he doesn't have very good stuff. This is a guy who relies upon kind of mixing and matching his pitches, his sequencing. He does give up a fair amount of in-zone contact, give up some hard contact. This is one that, like, and obviously it's not a little different. It's a lot different profile than Miles Mikolas. But one of the issues when Miles Mikolas had that like one season where he was like, a top 30 pitcher, was like, hey, this can all go wrong. It's really dependent on the defense behind him. It's really dependent on how hard of contact he gives up. And I could see things going really wrong with Tobias Myers. And I just don't see that there's massive upside when you got a guy who's got a 22% strikeout rate. Could he make it work? Could he, kind of continue to get by? Sure. But I think there's going to be a massive regression in the ERA. You look at, that 3 ERA, he had a 4.19 xERA, 3.97 xFIP. I think that's probably more of who he is. I think he's probably like a 4.20 ERA type pitcher, not close to being a low 3s ERA pitcher.
It comes down like the Hellickson comp, because again, he features a changeup. And then one of the things that made Hellickson so unique back in the day was his ability to just strand runners. Like he was posting 80. You go back and look at Hellickson's first 2 seasons, his left on base percentage was over 80% in both of them. And it's like, wow, maybe he can actually, I want to pull up his exact numbers because I remember that was really one of the things early on with him. It's like, how is he doing this? So if I go back and pull Hellickson in his first full season, 82%, then 83%. Then he went to 66%, 71%, 70, like all that finally caught up with him. But he made it last for 2 seasons. Myers could potentially do the same thing. So it's like in a reset league, I could see getting on board with Myers. In a keeper league, dynasty league, not as excited about him because his profile is eventually this falls apart. And it did for Hellickson. His thing was, he really didn't even get the strikeouts. You go back and look at what he was doing. He just didn't get the strikeouts, but he was pitching very similar. This looks a lot like Jeremy Hellickson. And it feels a lot like him. And just go back and look at what happened 2013 to Jeremy Hellickson after the 2-year run of success that he had.
Yeah. Let's move over to Kyle Harrison, who I think has quite a bit of flashes of being a really interesting pitcher. This is a former top prospect for the Giants. He was pretty good at moments, but the overall line was pretty terrible, especially because he finished pretty rough in 2024. He threw 124 in the third innings, had a 4.56 ERA, did get a fair amount of strikeouts. But only ended up with a 22% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. Where are you at on Kyle Harrison? Because it feels like there's some people who still really love him. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I had muted. I've got one of those mechanical keyboards. So as I type something in, I don't want all those clicks. Sorry. I honestly don't know what to think here because there's not enough stuff. Even the grades, even the stuff plus all the grades, nothing screams like, ooh, I should be in on this. Compared to everything else we've talked about so far, it feels like we're now at a different tier. And I don't know what the upside is here other than, okay, he pitches in a park that helps forgive mistakes. But other than that, I don't get it. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but overall, I'm not understanding why the market would be like, this is a guy that we should be focusing on in late rounds.
Yeah, I'm not a big Kyle Harrison fan. Now, he is much better at home than he is on the road. Like you said, he pitches in a great park, and the splits really, really bear it out. Virtually had the same amount of innings, 63 home innings and a 61 and a third away innings, 4.14 ERA at home, 4.99 ERA on the road. Gave up 12 home runs on the road, only 6 home runs at home. I think he's just a home streamer type of guy.
Yeah.
Like you've got a good matchup at home, you can stream it at home. But like this isn't a guy you should be drafting in most leagues, right? I guess in 15-team mix, this guy you can put on your bench and kind of try to team stream him in and out. But Kyle Harrison has massive inconsistency problems. If you look through his game log, you can see. Like he had 5 games where he had multi-homer games. He had 6 games where he had 3 walks or more. And then the strikeouts, man. Like the strikeouts, there are times where he comes out where it's home versus Colorado, 11 strikeouts, or home versus the Nationals, 8 strikeouts. On the road at Boston and on the road at Milwaukee, 7 strikeouts apiece. But then he's got so many games with 4 or less strikeouts. It looks like a total of 9 last year. I just don't know who he is start to start. And that becomes really difficult when you're trying to stream, because you go, okay, hey, maybe I just stream him at home versus decent matchups. But that can backfire really, really easily when he doesn't know from start to start what pitch he's gonna have command and control of. So I'm not a big fan of Kyle Harrison. I think he should be in the bullpen. And my hope had been that the Giants would sign one more starting pitcher and move him into the bullpen. I think they probably still could with Hayden Birdsong in the organization, but I think they're going to give Kyle Harrison an opportunity to make the opening day rotation as a starter and kind of see how it goes.
Let's see how it goes, but I will let somebody else take that chance.
Yeah. All right. One guy I really like on this list, but I don't even know if he's going to have a rotation spot with what the Reds have done so far this offseason in terms of adding pitching, is Rhett Lowder. Rhett Lowder only threw 30 2/3 innings at the major league level last year, but it was a 1.17 ERA. He showed some flashes. The first start was a little bumpy, but after that, he was great. Where are you at on Rhett Lowder? Do you think he has a chance of making the opening day rotation?
And so, like, here's where the leaderboard gets kind of wonky, right? So because he only pitched a little bit, he's got the worst strikeout minus walk rate of the whole group, right? But then go back and look at AAA. And he wasn't walking anybody. And so when you look at him, one of the things I really like, and I'm becoming more appreciative of this, is we talk about, and this was also said on the aforementioned Rates and Barrels podcast, where it's like a guy will talk, and I think we even said it on this show last week. A guy will talk about, I throw 4 pitches. But do you throw 4 pitches, or do you throw 2 to righties, 2 to lefties, 3 to righties, 4 to lefties, depending on what you do? You look at what Lowder did last year. I'm looking at 4-seamer, slider, sinker, and changeup. So he's got the 2 fastball approach. He's throwing all 4 of those to righties and lefties. It's not like I was looking at Nick Lodolo earlier this morning. Nick Lodolo doesn't throw his changeup against lefties. Just doesn't do it. Probably doesn't need it, but he does not throw his changeup to lefties. Whereas you look at a guy like Lowder here, and he's throwing all 4 to both righties and lefties. And I like that. So you are truly a 4-pitch guy, and that helps keep guys off balance with that. And maybe, perhaps that's why he had the success that he did in the minor leagues. He just wasn't walking anybody. I agree with you. It's a little crowded in that rotation if everybody stays healthy, because they added Brady Singer this winter. And they've got, Hunter Green, obviously, Andrew Abbott, Nick Martinez, and Nick Lodolo. I can't quit Nick Lodolo. I'm ready to get burned once again. The guy got hurt 4 different times, 4 different stints on the IL last year, and I'm still right back in. But there should be opportunity for him once the injury set in. But this is a pretty good rotation with Green, with Nick Martinez, the step forward he took. So unless they go 6-man rotation, I don't know if Lowder has the opportunity out of the gate. But I can certainly see taking a chance on him because of what he did before he got to the major leagues, and his willingness to throw all 4 pitches to righties and lefties. I can see where you're at on him.
Yeah, this is my second favorite guy on the list. The problem is you have to be realistic, and unless something happens in spring training that the Reds lose one of these pitchers to injury, or they just finally decide that Abbott doesn't belong in this rotation because he doesn't belong in this rotation, I think Rhett Lowder starts here in the minor leagues. So you have to really think about your team format, right? Like, can you roster a guy that may not be up until the end of April or into May? And a guy that you don't know when he's going to be up, right? If he struggles in AAA, which can happen to, lots of pitchers, maybe that timeline gets pushed off. So I think in most formats, you're not drafting Rhett Lowder, but you should have him on your watch list, because I think this is a really, really good pitcher in the making that has a lot of upside. We saw it in AAA or all throughout the minor leagues. And then he showed flashes of it in the majors. So I'm a big fan of Rhett Lowder. I'm a believer. This is a guy that, especially if he does not make the opening day rotation, I'm going to try to go buy low on him in Dynasty and keeper leagues, because I think that this is a guy that could turn out to be a really, really good pitcher in fantasy in the future. It just may not be early on in 2025.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Mitchell Parker, man, like this guy was so frustrating. Like he had this massive run where he was just, it seemed like he was the best pitcher in baseball for a little while. And then he got crushed, and then he'd show flashes. And where are you at on Mitchell Parker? He threw 151 innings last year, a 4.29 ERA, did a really good job of limiting walks and limiting home runs. But like the strikeouts were really, really inconsistent.
Yeah. Remember I said earlier, starting pitcher league wide strikeout rate was 22%, and the strikeout minus walk percentage was 14.4. By both of those measures, Parker is below average. By both of those measures, we talk about zone contact. Only there's one. He has the second worst in zone contact of all the pitchers that we're going to talk about today. And so, to me, those are red flags. And then we get back to what we were just talking about, how a guy can be a 4-pitch pitcher. And you go to Savant, you can see that he's got 4-seamer, curveball, splitter, and slider. But he's only throwing 3 of those pitches. He doesn't throw the splitter to lefties. So he's a 3-pitch pitcher against righties. He's a 4-pitch guy. So perhaps some of that madness could have been how that lineup was structured. So if he's facing a heavy righty lineup, okay, great. I'm throwing all 4 pitches. Or especially the splitter is going to get the swing and miss and get the strikeouts. And in his case, he had a 37% whiff rate on that pitch, and the league hit 233 off it. So that's a difference. Like I'm more on board with taking Lowder without a role than Parker with a role. And Parker has a job in this rotation right now. And I would rather take the shot on Lowder than take the shot on Parker, who doesn't have he doesn't have the fastball to get away with mistakes. He is getting, his best pitch is his non-fastball, but he's got to throw strikes with that fastball to set up those non-fastballs. And it's a risky profile overall. I see enough red flags where this is where the part of the draft where I'd rather take my chances on upside than that guy's he's got a job. I'm taking him as a job. I wanted to see where he's going in the
465. So right at the end of a 15-teamer.
Yeah. So like I'm looking around. Max Meyer.
I'd take Max Meyer.
You mentioned Yariel Rodriguez earlier.
I'd take Rodriguez
right there. Same.
Yeah.
Here at the end, you're just throwing darts. I'm scrolling around, and there's honestly.
But take the dart on the upside. Like both those guys that you just mentioned should be in the rotation for their respective teams. And Mitchell Parker, he just gives up so much contact. This is why he was so uneven, because when the defense behind him's picking him up, he's looks like he's pitching really, really well on his stat line. But when the defense isn't, like, it can go really bad, really, really fast.
So I mentioned DL Hall earlier. He's going 5 rounds after Mitchell Parker. I would take DL Hall all day long.
I'm not a DL Hall fan, right? I think DL Hall should be in the bullpen, but I will take that shot on DL Hall.
Correct.
So
either if he gets stretched out, because DL Hall does have a full repertoire. He could work as a starter if his body would hold up. But I would rather take the upside on what DL Hall could be versus what Parker is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% on that. So let's move on. Talk about Simeon Woods Richardson, who had a pretty good start to his career, but definitely showed signs of just wearing down. And I think the league catching up to him a little bit. He's not necessarily a hard thrower. He had just a 21% strikeout rate last year. Overall, through 133 and 2/3 innings with a 4.17 ERA. Where are you out on Simeon Woods Richardson?
Out. It's a below average pitcher. I just don't see that he's got enough stuff in an AL only league. You may have to take the chance. He made 28 starts and he won 5 of them. I know Minnesota had their issues, but if this is, like you said, he had a pretty decent climb, and then the league kind of caught up with him. Yeah. He's still young, but I just don't see enough there for me to get like, oh, I'm back in. I'm super excited. Again, this is another guy like Myers where his best pitch is his changeup. Mm-hmm. And that is not a sustainable, successful profile.
Yeah, I mean, he's tied for the worst stuff plus on this list with Mitchell Parker, right? So I think he could turn into one of these kind of middle of the rotation innings eaters types where like, hey, like he could volume his way to having some relevancy in deeper leagues, but like why draft that? Why draft that at this point in the draft? Like, especially because you're not 100% guaranteed that he's actually in this rotation. Right now, it looks like he is, but like if he has a really bad spring, he could easily be sent back. He's one of the few guys with options, and I think probably fighting for one of these last spots with Chris Paddock and David Festa. So I think for me, I'm banking on Festa. I think they're going to give Chris Paddock another shot, especially because Paddock is.
They're going to try to trade him. For everything that I've seen or read, is like Chris Paddock is, if they could find a 6-pack of a decent beer, they would trade him for that.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, it's a contract, the problem, but that's kind of the issue.
Yeah. I just think that there isn't enough upside outside of like a DC where you're just looking for cheap innings. So he's going pick 517. I just don't see a spot where you really taking on Simeon Woods Richardson at this point. So what about Mitch Spence? We're going to talk about some A's pitchers. Spence, had an interesting season as well. The overall line doesn't look great, but did show flashes. 151 innings last year, 4.58 ERA, going really, really late at pick, almost 600, 599. Where you at on Mitch Spence?
So there's two things. There's two reasons why I would take a chance on Mitch Spence, and I'm talking like AL only deep. For one thing, he's one of the few guys on this list who grades 100 or higher on all three of the stuff plus, location plus, and pitching plus, despite the fact he's got the worst zone contact of the entire bunch. Secondly, I would love to have him on a team so I could name my team Mitch Spence, none the richer. I would love to do that. So other than that, I don't have anything to, I have no other reason to draft him, but the fact that he grades out nicely, but the fact he's too hittable, I can pass on him. But if I'm in I could see taking him in like AL Tout Wars in the reserves. We don't name our teams in that league, but I would totally name my team Mitch Spence, none the richer.
He just gives up way too much contact. He lives in the zone way too much is the problem, and that's why
we don't know how that's going to play out in Sacramento. We don't.
We really don't. Like I've been reading as much as I can on what people think Sacramento is going to look like, and the problem is no one knows. Like everybody is like giving different opinions, and I really don't know where to go with that. I definitely think it's going to be worse than Oko, but that's just because Oko is one of the best parks in all of baseball to pitch in. Is it going to be like a top 10 hitters park? It could be. I don't know that it will be, though. I think it's probably going to be closer to neutral. But I don't think Mitch Spence is a good enough pitcher to take the gamble on. Honestly, I don't even know if there is a good enough pitcher in Oakland to take a gamble on this year.
Outside of Mason Miller.
I meant starting pitcher. Yeah, obviously Miller. Like Miller could be pitching in Colorado. I'd be interested in him right now. So.
Hey, so speaking of transition, is there a pitcher worth taking a shot on in Oakland? Let's transition over to. Are we going to go to the next pitcher, or are we going to stay in Oakland?
Let's just stay in Oakland. We'll talk about Joey Estes. Going to pick 706. I mean, I get heat when I say a pitcher is free or a player is free in the market. 706 is free in the market. Any interest in Joey Estes? Because like I said, I have zero interest in Oakland pitchers.
I have zero interest as well. And so, no, I really, if you want to statistically scout, the fact that he doesn't hurt himself with walks is always attractive, but that's really where it ends with him. He doesn't hurt himself with walks, but he also doesn't have the stuff to live in the zone. So I'm not here, and the uncertainty of Oakland. I say this with a lot of hesitancy. It's like, if you're an AL only player and the fact that two teams are an absolute freaking dead zone for starting pitching, what is that doing to the price and the value of the other starting pitchers of the other 13 teams? Because two teams are an absolute dead zone, and we're about to go to the other obvious one in a second. But you can make the case that there's not a draftable starting pitcher in Oakland or Chicago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like if you're really thinking about it, I guess like Severino is draftable, being in Oakland, but or no, sorry, Jeffrey Springs is definitely draftable. Not in Oakland, in Sacramento, and Springs probably the only guy I'm actually going to draft. But Severino is still on my board. But the rest of these guys, like I've had a love affair with JP Sears in the past that ends this season. I've never liked Estes or Spence, so I'm not even going to entertain them this season. So yeah, to me, it's kind of Jeffrey Springs or it's nothing in terms of the formerly Oakland, now Sacramento, or just the Athletics, apparently.
So Springs' ADP has been trending down since being traded out of Tampa Bay, which isn't surprising.
It shouldn't.
Yeah, it should not be surprising. So it's like looking at that, but he's still 228 and Severino's 284. And then we're out of the fourth, then we're out of the 30 round 15 team. That's it. Those two are the only starting pitchers that are being drafted. But if Sacramento plays up, who knows what we get with that. So as far as that's where my statement comes from earlier. It's like there's an argument, like if Sacramento all of a sudden plays up, then what are Springs and Severino? Are they streamers? Do we start them on the road kind of situation? How do we play them? But yeah, let's just transition over to Chicago because there's one guy that we have to talk about. But it's you look at Chicago and there are two pitchers that are being drafted inside the top 500 overall. Two. One of them's never thrown a major league pitch.
Yeah. Jonathan Cannon last year showed flashes. I'm not going to say he didn't. The overall line was 124 and a third in a 4.49 ERA with just a 17.5% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. Any interest in Jonathan Cannon outside of deep AL only?
No, and maybe because I've seen him pitch a couple of times here in Charlotte, and just the White Sox are still going to be terrible. They're still, even if they get 50% better, they're still going to lose 100 games. They're just not going to lose 120. So it's still going to be and Cannon somehow won 5 starts of his 21 last year. But I've seen the guy pitch a few times in Charlotte, and there's enough there, but not that much. And again, Chicago, I mean, I don't even know. They can't play themselves. So, like, if they have a game against Miami, maybe I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, I'll start Jonathan Cannon. But other than that, it's gonna be some rough sledding once again. And I don't know how you just take the roster spot for any starting pitcher. I'd rather take an upside on a reliever than try to stream any kind of Chicago White Sox starter this year, unless Noah Schultz comes up because that dude's legit.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I like, and Paul mentioned this, I think, on Friday. Like, I like what Chicago is doing for the long term. I do think that they are going to turn this ship around at some point. It's just not going to be this year. And while they will probably win more games than they did last year, just because I can't imagine them setting a record in back-to-back seasons, I just think the law of variance will mean that they win, the 50-something games. I do think this team is actually worse than it was last year. And I think that there is a likelihood that they could challenge their own record at some point again, especially if they, have the injuries that they had last year, or they trade away guys like Andrew Vaughn or Luis Robert. I mean, right now, this rotation in Chicago is Martin Perez, Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin, Sean Burke, and Bryce Wilson. Mm-hmm. That is atrocious. And I like I said, I like the direction they're going in. They're tanking the right way. They're kind of getting a little screwed with the new rules around the lottery that they can't have a top 10 pick in back-to-back years because they needed that top 10 pick this year. But they will have a top 10 pick in next year's draft. And it's just going to get worse and worse for this year, and then things will get brighter around the future. But I have zero interest in a guy like Cannon, who I don't think can be trusted start to start, and then you're on the worst team in all of baseball. Sorry, White Sox fans. At least you've got fantasy to root for.
Yeah, it's because I made the comment in the bold prediction series last installment, like Chicago can't possibly be as bad as they were this past season, and somebody challenged me. They're like,
yeah, mathematically they can't, but I think they can't. I think this is a worse.
They got rid of Crochet. They took out their lottery chances. And I was like, you know what? You're right. They could not. Everything
I
went
don't
wrong
think
for
they
them last year.
will. Yeah, like I don't think they will lose 40. Would they lose? They lost 121 games last season. Like I don't think. I think just the law of averages evens itself out, and they win 50 something games. But
Yeah.
that being said, like, is this a worse product on the field? Absolutely. This is absolutely a worse product on the field. And I think it could get worse as the season moves on. Because, like I said, I think there's a realistic chance that they trade Luis Robert, that they trade Andrew Vaughn. I think they'd love, if they could get from under his contract, I think they'd love to trade Andrew Benintendi. But like right now, like this is a bunch of just guys on this roster. You know, the future is bright. They will turn this around. I do believe in what they're doing long term, but right now, yeah, this is one of the worst. This is the worst game of baseball.
It's
All
gonna be
right,
a long season again.
that's gonna do it for this episode. Jason, where can people reach you at, and what are you working on?
So you find me on Blue Sky, Jason Collette, bsky.social. The NL Central bold predictions will be going live sometime tomorrow. I've got the final 2 write-ups to do, but like in true NFBC fashion, the average, the ADP of the 10 players that I discussed in the NL Central is 383 with a min pick of 133 and a max pick of 739. And so those 10 players that I'm discussing, and we broke down a little bit of one of these a couple of weeks ago. I got Pete Crow Armstrong. I have Matthew Boyd. I have Gavin Lux. I have Nick Lodolo. I have Caleb Durbin, DL Hall, Spencer Horowitz, Braxton Ashcraft, who disappointingly is not related to Graham Ashcraft. Crazy. I thought for sure there was a connection. Maybe they're cousins. They are not brothers. Ivan Herrera and Quinn Matthews. So those are the 10 names that I have. And the ADPs, again, anywhere from 138, which is Pete Crow Armstrong, or 133, which is insane. And then Ashcraft at 739. So that's the range of guys, and that'll be up sometime tomorrow. And that'll just leave me with the AL and NL West, which will get us through by the end of January. And then it is time to go from there. So look for those. And that's about it.
Yeah. You can reach me on all social media platforms, just Mason FWFB. I'm running a couple series on TikTok. Who knows? That's probably going to end soon because TikTok may end soon, but we'll see. Then I just started last week my series over on Fangraphs with the ADP market report, kind of tracking position by position, kind of who's rising, who's dropping, and why. And then I've got a bunch of articles that I'm starting tonight over Fantasy Pros. So lots of content, and the Friends of Fantasy Benefits podcast will be starting hopefully this week. It really just depends on how many articles I can knock out tonight. So if not, it will start the week after. So that is this episode. For Jason and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.
Thanks, guys.